Hello, welcome to the Loud Lens. It's me, Khandie, and I am fresh off watching the Super Bowl with Bad Bunny. And it got me thinking because honestly, photography, the arts, everything is a tool of power and resistance. And yet a lot of people are not aware. One of the reasons people struggle with this conversation about, let's just talk about photography, with this is a photography podcast. Um, as a tool for power and resistance is because photography has always sat on both sides of power. An example, okay? Early photography was used to document people, often stripping them of their identity, naming, agency. And think think about photography. Sometimes it was staged, it was clinical, it was dehumanizing because in the very nature of how they did the photographs, you couldn't rapid fire and they would often pose the people, okay? And sometimes people were photographed to almost to in a way so they could document what they looked like, even though let's still talk about the Native Americans. Even though when they were documenting the Native Americans at the time, they were forcing them onto reservations, they were slaughtering them, they were colonizing them effectively. Whether you want to have that conversation or not, that was what was happening, and yet they photographed them, almost mocking them, like we want to photograph you so we can preserve you as this image, but at the same time we're trying to eradicate you as a people. Okay, that's a very political thing. Now, I understand you could say, well, maybe they were trying to preserve them, but the action of photographing them and not giving them that photograph, because there was many who never obtained the photographs, they were kept just for the photographer or the newspaper that wanted them. That is very dehumanizing. They didn't get the right to their own image, essentially. Like now we have the laws as much as they are there, but that's what I'm trying to explain to you. That was political. At the same time, photography has also been used later to expose things like child labor, unsafe working conditions, war atrocities, racial violence. It's the same tool and the same method, of capturing it, although different photography and it's obviously changed in the nuances of how it's created. But it's a very different intent. This is important because it kills the idea that photography is just a camera, that politics aren't in gear, it's in who controls the narrative and the choice in what we present. You can't separate photography from politics when it's been used to justify oppression and also to dismantle it. Often, those people are holding the same camera, okay? Documentary photography has changed public policy, and I want to get very specific here. Can I say that word? Specific. And I will acknowledge this is a very heavy Loud Lens podcast episode from me, but I have been very much listening to the social media stratosphere, as they say. And when I did the episode on political protest photography not too far back, I had people commenting saying, I don't think photography has a place in politics. I think they should be out of protest and all of that. There are some huge things that photography has done. Lewis Hine didn't just take sad pictures of children. His images of child labour in factories was used as evidence and they contributed to actual labour reform, particularly in the US. Okay. That wasn't aesthetics. That had political consequence. Another famous one was Dorothea Lange's Migrant Mother. It wasn't just an iconic portrait, and it is. It became the symbol of the Great Depression. It shaped public perception of poverty and influenced government aid. Okay? The woman that photographed didn't benefit financially. The power still sat with the institutions. So even good activist photography isn't clean or perfect. It's messy, it's complicated. It involves ethics, intention, and outcome. I have one that I can talk about. There was the one about I don't know if you remember, I can't I'm not gonna Google it now. There was one of a photographer who photographed in Africa a child, and I'm gonna trigger this is awful. This is really awful, okay? Trigger a child starving, thirsty, crawling in the dirt, and in the picture at the distance is a vulture waiting. Let that sit with you for a minute. There is a starving, dying child and a vulture waiting for its lunch, right? And there's a mud hut a little bit further back, a hut further back. That photographer did not take that child and put that child in the hut. That child was too weak to move. And ultimately, I would like to think what happened did not happen, but we will never know. That photographer himself, when he returned back to America, realized what he did, and apparently it contributed to his decision to remove himself from this life. Okay. We also have the controversial, however you sit on it, for the Afghan child, the woman that was very famous on Time magazine, who later on, when they approached her, said she'd received no financial aid from it or hadn't really, and it was an uncomfortable way it was done. again, it shows the people, but also there was an element of I'm gonna say, I don't wanna get myself in trouble here. There are many people who you can find them on the internet have said it felt exploitative, okay? I don't know too much about that story, so I am gonna ask you to do your own due diligence on that one. But I will just say, there is many things that have exposed, but also covered up, and often it's complicated. And yeah, I think that what we genuinely need to do, stop pretending that photography is neutral, because it's BS. It's not. It hasn't been. Yes, maybe you photographing in your studio is neutral for you, but are you? We're going to get onto that because I think that's something else we can discuss. And I want to acknowledge the privilege I have of saying this. I have a platform. I have what I'm doing, and you too could talk to me. I want to have discussion on this. Okay. War photography is one of the biggest lies I think people tell us that shows neutrality. We call it objective documentation. I saw that in an article, right? And we go, yeah, yeah, they're just photographing what happened. But every frame is framed. Every image is chosen. Where the photographer stood, who they followed, what they were allowed to see, and then furthermore, what they were allowed to publish. Vietnam is an amazing example. Images like the Napalm Girl didn't just show war, they shifted public opinion. They turned the stomach of people back home. They challenged official narratives. That's activism through imagery, whether the photographer called themselves an activist or not. Okay. There are many examples of this. Okay. Many examples where this has gone on. You know, we know about the movie with Kate Winslet, where she talks about the photographer, where she, why is the name just forgotten me? Please let me know. I've forgotten the name. I had it in the script here, but I'm using this. If you don't know, I do script these episodes, and I also have my own little sections for ad libbing. This is one of them. Lee Miller. There we go. And she went from fashion photography to incorporating fashion photography into real life to bring out this sort of connection to what was going on in wartime Britain. And then she photographed herself in the luxury of, you say, of the Führer's bathtub. And then she did the photographs of the atrocity. And as I understand it, Cecil Beaton was the one who tried to stop her from having them published. And eventually they got published. Okay. But they were published overseas. You know, it helped open up, and it was very political, okay? But they were also, again, she was told that she couldn't publish some of that work, and she continued to do it and do her own thing and break down barriers to go get it. Now, I'm pretty sure on the other side of the more so on the Germanic side, the German side, the Nazi side, they had their own photographers portraying what they wanted. I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is depends on where you sit and who you're producing it for and what they allow you to produce and see, okay? Censorship in photography has always existed. People imagine censorship as this image is banned, but it's a lot more like galleries will refuse to display exhibitions, magazines will pull features, platforms will shadow ban work, and funding will quietly disappear. Okay. I want to talk about the backlash against the Trump administration photographs. I think Vanity Fair did them. Was it Vanity Fair? And everyone went mad and said they deliberately showed them badly. In actual fact, what they showed was them unretouched, and yet there was lots of arguments about how bad it was and how unfair it was. But that's what your politician looks like. Why are you not allowed to see what they really look like? Why does it have to be presented in a certain way? People, oh, you're just trying to make them look bad. No, that's what they look like. Like in that lighting, that is what they. Why was that? And it became political. It became political. And people were like, we can't talk about it. We're getting cease and desist. I was hearing bloggers getting cease and desist. It was weird, right? It was weird. I've got further examples where photography involving nudity, bodies, queerness, protest, or marginalized communities is constantly policed, while violent imagery often slides under the banner of news. Yeah? We see this. It tells you exactly what kind of politics were acceptable or palatable in the eyes of those who are in the authority to expose what we're doing or sharing to the masses, yeah? And photographers learn fast. If you want exposure, funding, or platform growth, don't push too hard. That's not creative freedom, by the way. That's behavioral conditioning as far as I see it. Now, street photography loves to pretend it's about observing life. And I'm a massive street photography fan. I'm not saying I'm amazing at it, it's something I enjoy doing. But I always question, and I know this sounds weird because I've just come off the back of doing a street photography workshop and I spoke about this. Who gets photographed and who doesn't? Who is labeled interesting, boring, or perhaps even superstitious? Street photography has long been tied to surveillance culture, policing narratives, and class voyeurism. When people from marginalised communities say, stop photographing us without consent, they are told it's art, it's legal, you don't understand photography. That response is political, prioritising the photographer's freedom over a subject's autonomy. Okay? I'm not saying whether you agree with it or not is going to make you a bad or right photographer, but there are certain boundaries I don't cross because I believe that while I legally can, do I ethically want to? Okay. Again, you have a power as a photographer what you put out. And I have this discussion at the front of my photography workshop, even just last night, where I said that one of the things I don't agree with is photographing the people who are homeless, living on the street, unless you're doing it for a news thing to highlight the plight. It is not for you to go, oh my God, look how edgy I am. Look how edgy I am. Look how edgy I am. I photographed someone who slipped through. I am super freaking edgy. Yeah. Right? No. No, no, no. What you're doing is using your position to create for yourself so you look good and in no way helping them. Okay, you can tell me, oh, but I'm highlighting. No, but babe, I'm highlighting homelessness. No, no, you're not. Because if you were highlighting it, you'd be out protesting, you'd be out voting against it, you'd be helping those people. If you're photographing it and doing nothing with those images except putting it online, in the most absolutely diluted way possible in like 4 millionths of a part, perhaps you are. But for the most part, it's about your ego and how you're photographing. It's a fence I've always never sat on this one. I strongly believe it. And the other thing that I really hate, and this is discussed this in my latest YouTube video with Steve, the street photographer, and you can go watch it on my YouTube. Go find it, Khandie Photography. There was a little bit of a trend on the old TikTok where people would go out and they would photograph buskers and they'd print off the photo and rather than give them money because they photographed them and using them for their content and boosting their own credibility and their own platform, they would hand them the photo and go, yeah, there you go, that's for you. That's for you. Now, buskers are out there trying to make money from their talent, yeah? Um, and I couldn't help but think, like, so you didn't tip. And there was actually a video that got sent to me quite a few times where people were outraged, but oddly didn't want to tell the person they were outraged by it, where this photographer printed off the picture and said, like, what I gave him a photo as a tip instead. Oh, brilliant. I felt it beneath me to give you money. But do you know what's worth more than money? My photo of you. Yeah. Yeah. And my right to use you in my commercial gains content. Yep. Yeah. And what's really bad is I found out this person was quite local to me, but I stand by that and I would say that to their face. So if you are that photographer, I'm saying this now. I don't agree with you and that's okay. And there's probably gonna be people who do agree with you, and that's their choice. I'm not sitting on a fence today, am I? Okay. I I I I have a thing, like it's just the way I am, okay? I'm gonna get in so much hate. Please comment if you agree or don't agree. I love a debate. We're adults. This isn't a hate debate. This is let's have a healthy, artistic, professional debate. Let's talk about it. But I also think there's a modern problem that photographers don't like admitting to because sometimes protests have become aesthetic content. Okay. I've seen photographers take pictures who because they want to make it's got like an edge to it. They want to look like they're edgy. So they have the cinematic smoke. They have the frame marches, but they don't educate you on what's going on. They don't talk about what was going on. They have no follow up. There's no real accountability. And sometimes photography that looks activist doesn't challenge much. And sometimes there are people who will use the concept of a protest for their fashion work. Okay. So you'll have perfectly framed marching and they'll be singing, dancing, and they'll be like, yeah, look at us, fashionistas. Watch the woman strut down in her amazing clothes. So use if you like, the aesthetic of a protest to put into your fashion. That in its very nature has a political element to it, okay? And it is political. It's just safely commodified. It's made palatable because it's fashion. It's okay, babes. It's fashion. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's absolute fashion, and platforms reward that. I have no problem. We use smoke bombs at weddings, and smoke bombs are notoriously for. Originally, they're used in war games. They're used by the police. They are used by all sorts of things. But we've now made them pretty colours and we use them in weddings. And I'm not saying that in itself is political, but there is an element when that has come across because we like how that looks. We like the drama because we associate the drama with the political marches that use it or the incidents that have used it. But now we want to make it palatable and put it at weddings. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I just want to show you how sometimes we dilute things down and some of that little drips of political content goes into our other work. And it is. And I know you don't want to think that deep, and that's why you don't have to. But as a podcast person, as a host of this episode, I kind of have to delve into certain areas and suggest this. And this was actually what someone said to me not too long ago about the smoke bombs. And I never really thought of it till then. But I thought I'd just put that out there. Because I'll be honest, when platforms reward it, it can it makes you feel like, oh yeah, I'm doing my bit. But I'm not threatening power, so it's okay. They'll keep liking me. Which is why sometimes the uncomfortable work, the confrontational work often gets buried. Okay. Now let's talk about Bad Bunny, right? Because that's the one that really started this whole episode. And I was seeing the comments, right? I want to tell you now, Bad Bunny did not invent a political moment at the Super Bowl. He did a moment that really stood out because it's in light of everything going on in the political stratosphere of America. He spoke about how this is what makes America, all these different nationalities, all these different people, and people going mad 'cause he didn't say it in English. And I was like, he doesn't have to say it in English. He Puerto Rican, which I believe Bad Bunny's from, their main language is Latino, and they are part of America. So he's allowed to speak his American language for him, which is Puerto Rican, yeah, Latino. Why is that a problem? We have a problem. Why? Because I've got Americans out there identifying as Italian, yet they've never lived in Italy. But we don't have a problem with people singing opera in Italian. We don't have a problem with that. But somehow we had a problem with a guy singing his songs in his language. I have to say, it baffled me. This isn't the first time we've seen this. Beyonce at the Super Bowl with her Black Panther imagery. Kendrick Lamar bringing incarceration and racial politics into mainstream stages. Nina Simone being punished for being too political. I mean, even down to the song "Strange Fruit." If you know that song, it's freaking heartbreaking, mate. Oh, it's insane. It's always been that art and politics have always gone side by side. If it's not in the lyrics, it's in how the artist is treated based on where they're from, their heritage. It's there. The pattern is always the same. Art is celebrated until it refuses to dilute itself, and then suddenly people are told to stick to entertainment. Why are you pushing an agenda? But here's the thing, the agenda has always been there. And I am sorry to admit it, you only have to look at certain things and it centers around a certain centric looking person, nationalism, capitalism, and often masculinity. And that's when the center shifts and people want to focus on something else, people kind of get a bit uncomfortable with that because they become comfortable in what they're doing. Okay? And I think it needs to be acknowledged. I think it does. I don't know if I'm the right person. So this is an episode. Maybe you're not involved in this and you're not interested, but it's an interesting concept, right? And I felt like I wanted to talk about it because I was kind of sick to death of seeing people saying he shouldn't have made the Super Bowl political. It is very political. They have the national anthem. They have sometimes the president shows up. They have military flyovers. That's all political, baby. Whether you like it or not. It has been political. It's not the kind of politics you want to digest and be confronted with, but it is political. So if you're a photographer today and you say, I just want to shoot and stay out of it, ask yourself, what does that protect? What does that sign? And what does it benefit? Because opting out doesn't remove politics. It aligns you with whatever already dominates and it gives you're happy in whatever is currently the situation. Because you don't want to risk it, okay? And I'm not having a go at you because I think some people can't risk it because they're not ready to risk it. And that's okay. It doesn't make you a bad person. But I do think you need to be honest about it. The industry has a level of hypocrisy, and I'm going to say this. The photography industry loves activism when it sells workshops, when it boosts personal brands, when it boosts engagement, but hates activism when it threatens sponsors, it challenges gatekeepers, and it questions ethics. It's not an accident. That's capitalism choosing where politics are allowed. You don't have to be loud, you don't have to be radical, and you don't have to burn bridges, which maybe this episode has done for me. But what you do have to understand, inside every image sits a part of history. Inside every image, it reflects some sort of power, be it the power of you to choose what you photograph, what you think is aesthetically pleasing, what you think is worth documenting. Every image participates in politics, whether you realize it or not, whether it's intended to or not. The only difference is whether you are conscious to it. This has been The Loud Lens. I am Khandie. I know this has been an unusual episode for me, but these are discussions I'm having and I'm very active in the Facebook groups and I wanted to talk about this because if you know, I'm very politically motivated at times. And I like talking about this and I realise I have a great privilege in who I am as a person to be able to talk about this and I hope maybe this will open some discussions and we can chat. I don't know if I have done this episode justice, and maybe I've misspoken, and I hope you realize my intent in my purpose was in the right place. But I'm open to discussion because I think that's something that's absolutely beautiful about doing a podcast and having a social media platform is that we can discuss this sort of thing. So let me know how you feel. And let's discuss it. I'm not here to deliberately piss anybody off, but I am here to sort of maybe awaken some people who think just because they're taking pretty pictures, they're just taking pretty pictures. There's a lot in the history of photography that has allowed us to take those pretty pictures, but what we perceive as pretty is because somewhere along the line we've been indoctrinated to think that is pretty. Okay? Maybe I've said that right. I don't know. This has been The Loud Lens. I'll see you all in the next episode. Oh, hear you. You'll hear me in the next episode. That's probably a better way of saying that.